Welcome back to the program. And we continue to analyze and comment on the situation in the world. Today we're going to talk about weaknesses of the Chinese Navy and military. It shows in what two of their ships just did together in the South China Sea. It's still an old story, but there are things. New perspective, and we hope that you've seen the entire video. Today, there will be answers for those. My question is, well, the VA hit you in the back with a stick, between the Chinese destroyer and the ship. Their Coast Guard in the South China Sea. It was August 11th. Well, it happens. 4 days later, Ministry of National Chinese Room give a reaction to this incident. With this incident and still trying to cover it up. It wasn't until August 15th that they started talking about that incident, and through in this case, we see the power, weak operations and command, of Beijing. Along with the lack of discipline, poor quality of equipment, and all those problems sooner or later, it's also exposed. Fortunately for the military, China is exposed early, before they had the ambition to invade Taiwan. If not, you're in a fight. Really on the battlefield. It happens that VA touches like that are ugly. It's embarrassing. And on a scale bigger is the army. China is also facing a situation. It's a strategic dilemma. What is the situation? We'll find out in today's video. First of all, well, I have to say that this is not an accident. The first in history that accidents as well as actions. The aggressive Chinese army. Let's go back a little bit. In recent years, then Beijing has consistently taken decisive actions, aggressive, unprofessional and dangerous to ships and planes from other countries. You can mention some cases as follows. By May 2022, the Chinese. It was J-16. Dropped the metal pieces, jamming the engines of Australian anti-submarine aircraft in the South China Sea. Well, it's caused a pretty diplomatic incident, is severe, and pose a risk of engine failure in Australian aircraft. It's a clear provocation. And that's the provocation. Maybe in retaliation for what Australia did, has called for a COVID origin investigation, and there is determination for China's actions in the South China Sea. Almost a year later, in March 2023, the U.S. destroyer Milos was also run over by Chinese ships and cut his face in the islands. Hong S.A. To a 6/2023. The Chinese plane is back again. It's a scandal. It's that they intercepted the Canadian plane near dawn. It's an extremely dangerous and compelling situation. Canadian aircraft must change course. Then from October to December 2023, there have been more than 180 cases of Chinese planes flying close to the airport in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. Again, 180 cases are too dense. And that includes dangerous actions. It's like dropping pieces of metal, jamming and flares firing to harass American and Allied planes. It's been quiet for a while until 8/2024. The Chinese Coast Guard touched and sprayed water cannons on the Philippine ship is the Teresa Mac Banua. And the VA touch of the Philippines and China are in the South China Sea. It's been getting worse since the president Ferdinand Marcos Jr. comes to power. The VA case that hit 8/2024, it happened near the Sabina Beach. Until February of this year, the plane, a Chinese naval helicopter also flies Police Patrol Plane Philippines. It's only a few meters in the South China Sea. And it was also a VA touch that almost caused the accident. In general, VA cases like that, it is popular. At that time, the Chinese helicopter. They're just a few feet away from the Philippine plane, about 3 meters. Very close to 3 m. In the air, you can see how dangerous it is. 3 meters below the ground, it feels like painting. It seems that there is still far away, but in the air, 3 meters is a very close distance. And VA touch in the air, it can lead to tragedy. In February 2025, the Chinese, they dropped flares and pieces of metal jamming near the Australian plane, the P-8 Poseidon in the South China Sea. Australia is the victim. To May, Chinese planes fly close at high speed, intercepting USRC a BA-5 spy plane in Taiwan Strait. And as recently as June 2025, injection, the Chinese J-15 also made a move. Abnormal. towards Japanese surveillance aircraft in the East China Sea. Generally, it's along the East China Sea. The Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea are China. It's caused a series of VA collisions. Cases that are so unprofessional. Yes, but they often say they go at night. One day I met a ghost. In fact, the Chinese military, because of the policy, it's so aggressive, so many times has happened, a serious accident on their own. For example, in April 2003, there was one Min-class submarine accident, BA-6, one of the drills in the Yellow Sea, between North Korea and Shandong province. Mechanical failure, it causes the air intake valve not to open. This leads to a lack of oxygen when the diesel engine is running. The ship had been floating for 10 days before it was discovered. 70 people died, including 13 naval cadets and ship commanders. It was a very serious incident. Until August 2011. Radiological leaks on 2-09-ton class nuclear submarines. It happens when you're installing electronics at the port. It was also a time. It's a very serious radiation leak. In July 2016, the J Navy fighter 15 of China fell in night landing training on the aircraft carrier Lunin, where he had a technical problem and tried to save the plane. 7 failed and died. 11/2016 is another crash of J-15. It happens in the training for landing on an aircraft carrier and the pilot died. By March 2019, the Navy's fighter jet, it could be J-15 or a similar model, fell in Hainan province during training. It killed 2 pilots. Is 8/2000 not hundreds 2BA, a Tai-09BA nuclear submarine accident. The number 417 in the Yellow Sea exercise happened, and the ship is said to be trapped in an anti-submarine trap set by China itself, leading to a gas filtration system failure and toxic gas leakage. The entire crew of 56 died. However, this case is the world's media. Well, that's what they do. China doesn't admit it. Yes, but through third-party sources. Independent sources find it to be a lot. The family of these sailors, they have submitted an application, crying on social media. And more recently, March 2025, Chinese J-15 plane crashes in Hainan province. While training, the plane lost propulsion and the pilot. This time I was lucky to jump out. There's one thing in common in plane crashes of China, that pilots often die. What about a plane crash? Every country has it. The US also has Russia. Western countries have sometimes. But what we find is that if accidents happen, such a fighter in the US, usually the pilot, they survived and just lost their plane. If that, the comparison between the plane and the pilot is surely the pilot is more important, because you know it's to train a pilot. It's not that simple to fly a fighter. It's hard to fly a civilian plane. It's getting harder to fly a fighter and pilot it. It's national property. So, a plane that's missing, it doesn't affect the Air Force very much, but a missing pilot is a whole system. There are also interruptions. It's easy to build an airplane. It's hard to train a good pilot. People are always so precious. At sea, warships and Chinese Coast Guard ships have also repeatedly high-speed chase and intercept Philippine ships, including patrol boats, civilian ships and fishing vessels in the South China Sea, and that's what just happened near Scarborough Shoal, when the destroyer Gillan Tai-052D and ships of China Southern Coast Guard, at the same time chasing and intercepting the Suleiman of the force, Philippine Coast Guard, and lead to their VA touch. It is an inevitable consequence of things. That's how China's aggression works. Both are related to the military. The ships of both sides. So this is actually a confrontation. Military. In these tense confrontations, battle under warships is at risk. VA touching it is huge. In the sea, there are many. The wave-like element of the wind, it makes you. The path calculation is also not standardized. It's a normal thing. Compared to a land-based car control. Then control the boat, it's a lot harder underwater. You can't stop or slow down with just one kick. Where's the brake? It's also very difficult to divert ships, because the friction of the waves is then the wind's drag. So what the ship does, high-speed pursuit and interception, it's extremely dangerous. The larger the vessel, the harder it is to avoid VA contact. It's harder to brake, it's harder to slow down. What kind of brakes do you have at sea, ladies and gentlemen? The friction force is greater than the force. On the road, you can brake. But on the sea, it's really hard to. But avoid it. So those are the waterway accidents. It's often catastrophic. It's like that. You know that. Sometimes there is news that. Yeah, the land barge, it crashed into the foot of the bridge. Or the ships that are on the waterways at sea. They touch each other. Many people ask why. The sea is so wide. The river is so wide that it keeps coming together. Well, that's the answer. It may seem that wide. But the thing about redirecting ships at sea, it's extremely difficult. It's forced to drive early and drive old. I'm sorry for driving. And the old handle is whatever VA touch. So the case that VA touch Chinese ships, it's normal. It is understandable because they're using high speed to chase the ship. Philippines. And over the years, Chinese warships, they've also repeatedly harassed US and allied ships in a reckless way. I have to say that DOS has to use the exact word that it's DOS. They even deliberately cross-cut their faces. Cut through the bow of the enemy ship. If you do that, it's a risk. Very big accident. Because you imagine that it's in a boat. Warships at sea. Move it already. It's not possible to redirect well. This is deliberately running cross-sectional like that. It's no different than wanting an accident. The American side also has repeatedly given very stern warnings, warning of what the Chinese Navy perform unprofessional actions. Hammer A. Zhonghu. And ask China to demand Beijing's military quickly engage in bilateral communication, clearly comply with the ship. War and aircraft are approaching to prevent VA touch from happening. You know, the two great powers, the United States and China. They're all trying to make their mark in the South China Sea, but in the South China Sea, or even the Taiwan Strait area, just one wrong calculation, a small VA touch only, it's also easy, is to cause unwanted stress. China's behavior in the South China Sea, it's soft, let go of the snake. They've always refrained from acting in front of the United States. But it's increasingly aggressive towards the Philippines or other countries. The pursuit and interception of Philippine ships in the South China Sea. It's become very popular. So popular is the media. In China they're also constantly promoting this as a form of patriotic propaganda. How often Chinese warships chase and intercept Philippine ships? It's increasing. It also increases the ability of VA to touch. Finally, then the accident had happened as an inevitable consequence. But the accident happened in a way that made the North the most humiliating. Propaganda. In the Chinese media, they are always, for those who do, the danger of the Navy, then the Chinese Coast Guard. Political officers of the Chinese military, also often waving flags and chanting slogans internally, turning patriotic propaganda into propaganda. Foreign officials. Soldiers of all levels. Let's look at these dangerous interceptions. It's an opportunity to be successful and they are willing to act that way. It's no coincidence that Chinese ships are aggressive. So they have this whole aggressive culture. Aggressiveness is one thing, but experience is. In the field, it's something else. Due to lack of experience, they are. The officer, the soldier of China, he underestimated the seriousness of the risks. It can happen. Chinese Coast Guard. They often participate in them, to pursue and intercept Philippine vessels, without even realizing that actions it also breeds can be caused, danger to themselves. This time the captain and the crew, officer on the destroyer, the end of China's mistake, maybe with the mind, based on the large tonnage of the destroyer. They are not afraid to touch, and want to impress, so I ignored it. The common sense is that big ships are hard to turn around direction because the inertia is large. As a result, they've slowed down. No VA can enter Philippine ships, but the VA with its own Coast Guard ship. The video, from the scene, it shows that both ships can't stop or redirect in time. Of course, the larger the ship, the harder it is to navigate. That's why the VA hit it. Even it, VA touch it happens so fast that the doctors on the bow of the Coast Guard. There's no chance. Run back to escape. China, they usually deploy multiple ships to deal with one ship of foreign countries. For example, a Philippine ship or an American ship. But when many ships are focused on such a goal, the more they ignore their own dangers. The more Chinese ships, the more crowded and the more reckless, and the risk of VA contact between them. Our army is getting bigger and bigger. Something that the Chinese military is poorly aware of as a risk works infrequently, lack of basic common sense and contempt for life. It's not just in a few isolated accidents. That it reflects a real level of training. The economy in peacetime is very poor. The reckless activities of the ship, Chinese boat in practice. It's also related to things, the usual unprofessional directives of the chain, commander of China. And through incidents like this one, then it exposed the level, training of the Chinese Navy. The usual training of a destroyer. Gillen has no entries related to the collision of small ships, because in combat the destroyer, there's no case used to crash a ship. The enemy, however, in this campaign, Captain Gillen, they seem to want to win. And crew. Perhaps you have been lost in the thought that their 500T ship could easily crush the Coast Guard ship. Philippine Coast Guard. It's over 300T and ready to make it roll over. Whether VA collides with Philippine ships, the destroyer Gillen itself, it can also be damaged. It's a possibility that the AI knows. And the last destroyer, Lam, is a class. Tai 052D is extremely expensive to build. Repair costs will also be huge if damaged. More, the number of Chinese destroyers is relatively small, and after being allocated to the 3 war zones, there is only one left in each area. The number of destroyers is very limited. If there is an accident that the destroyers couldn't do their job, it will make the military. China is in a situation they call jerking bare shoulder patch. Captain of the Gillen. There seems to be a lack of such wisdom. And he chose how to compete with the Chinese Coast Guard. To gain credibility by diving in, small ships of the Philippines. RA was supposed to be a Chinese destroyer. No need to jump in. Maybe let the Chinese Coast Guard handle it. It's even faster and smoother. But this is definitely one competition between the Navy and the Coast Guard. It says coordination, but that kind of coordination is too much for each other. Just this one. It shows the captain of the Gillen ship. It's not qualified enough. A destroyer ship. Tai 052D is equipped with underground sensors, too close to other ships. It could damage those sensors, and exacerbate the consequences of the VA hit. However, the officers and crew on board Gillen showed a lack of understanding. It's a very clear lack of understanding. Or they also lack maritime knowledge, basically again, or simply following orders blindly. The top commanders are political commissars. They don't understand military operations. I only know about politics. And whether the captain of a Chinese destroyer have the authority to decide for themselves the collision with the Philippine ship or not, it's still a question. With the management tradition closed off by the Chinese military Gillen ship, I wouldn't dare to engage in a chase. So if there's no order from the fleet, South China Sea or the Naval Command, this order, maybe it wasn't a sudden urge of the captain. It's an act of obedience. Be aware of the significant risks. The captain hesitated, not seeking professional advice. He was dedicated to carrying out his orders. Or maybe the captain volunteered, getting approval from the top. And because of the desire to achieve, so despite the consequences. In both cases, the professional capabilities of the Chinese Navy. It all shows that RA is seriously weak, and their command structure is also very weak. After the VA hit, the Gillen should have stopped working immediately. Quickly assess the rescue damage, treatment for the injured, and look for people in the water. However, they continued to pursue the Philippine ships and the Philippine ship itself. He even made a search and rescue request. Captain, the Chinese Gillen may have lost its way. His panic was sparked by hatred, and tried to put some anger on the ship of the Philippines. And 4 days after that VA hit, Chinese defense kit, they claim that the ship, Philippine Coast Guard, there are often dangerous actions. It's like hitting a Chinese ship at high speed and swerving to cut across the bow, creating a complex and tense situation at sea. Oh, finished reading this. It's white for black, ladies and gentlemen. What China says the Philippines is doing. These are the main thing that China does, but now they're blaming the Philippines. And their military routinely blames and covers up. It happens even after the event has happened. And the whole world knows. They don't take internal issues seriously. Philippine Coast Guard ships weigh just over 300 T. That SAO could actively crash into a destroyer 7.500 T. Or the ship that China Coast Guard has over 1,400 tons here. Even Chinese Coast Guard ships are heavy. 4 to 5 Philippine ships. There is no one who has any reason. They're going to hit a ship bigger than me. And such illogical claims. Maybe only Chinese officials, just think of it. And it shows a distortion of information. They are extremely professional. The destroyer Gilena it belongs to. It was the third and was commissioned in September 2021. It means it's very new. It's been about 4 years, less than 4 years. Due to such a relatively short service time. So this kind of incident, it's not worth it. Surprising Chinese Navy. It can also be a lack of understanding of how to train. Modern warship. Regularly used training methods. Copies of other countries. Now let's talk about another problem. That's the actual performance of the destroyer 052D and frigate 056. It's a bit of a big deal. Before and after the August 11th incident, the ship 052D Gillen of China tried to stab the Philippine ship. He must have wanted to capsize the Philippine ship. But it didn't work. The Philippine Silwan is a patrol boat. It's very light. Of the Parola class. Mainly used for law enforcement activities, maritime law and humanitarian rescue only. Maximum speed, it's about 2 to 5 knots. That's 4 to 6 kilometers per hour. And the Chinese 052D, it's supposed to have a top speed of up to 30 knots. That's 6 kilometers per hour. That's faster than the Philippines. But you can't hit a Philippine ship. Because of the Philippine patrol boats. It's better able to redirect the head. And who operates them, maybe even more experienced. They are about to be caught by Chinese ships, maybe they've turned the wheel wide. However, the Chinese ship turned around more slowly. It seems to be getting closer, but it's inaccessible. Speed of 052D may not be as high as advertised. That's why it couldn't catch the patrol boat. Philippines and in a desperate move. Instead of chasing from behind, Chinese warships have moved to fight back. Try to cut your face, but they calculated it wrong. And the VA collided with the pursuing Chinese Coast Guard ship. The back is actually a very poor coordination. Early July 2025, at the launch of the fleet or the carrier, Shandong of China in Hong Kong, the New York Times reported that ship, 5 years pregnant, has reached the world's leading standard. I mean their destroyer. However, when evaluating the Thai 052D, the report only says that it has superior all-out combat capabilities. I dare not claim that it has also been achieved to the standard top of the world like 5 years. Maybe China itself is fully aware about the true capacity of 052D. It's not like the original propaganda. South China Coast Guard ship hit by VA. Originally it was frigate 056. There were 22 ships. This 056 was in service from 2013 to 2016. After 2021, all of them. They were all transferred to the Chinese Coast Guard, and the weapons on these frigates were also dismantled. The Chinese Navy was later put into service. Frigate 056A. Proved to be the first batch of 05-6 It did not meet the requirements and was delivered for the Coast Guard. However, even the frigate 056A later. It also has a maximum speed of 2.5 knots per hour. That's 4 or 6 kilometers per hour. It is equivalent to the China Coast Guard ship, and it has no speed advantage. And the case that China's shame accident between those two Coast Guard and Navy ships, it also exposes a distance, professional competence, distance on equipment performance, and it highlights the wrongs, Beijing's major strategic shortcomings. Now we're going to talk the weaknesses of the Chinese Navy. From that incident, we look deeper, we look wider. The incident that happened near the shoal, Scarborough in the South China Sea, it's less than 200 kilometers from the Philippines. But it's 900 kilometers from Hainan Island and more than 600 kilometers from the Hong Sa Islands. Since China took control of the shoal, Scarborough in 2012, they kept chasing away the ships. Philippine boat approaching. And the Scarborough Shoal. It's far from the base of China's South China Sea Fleet. It is relatively close to the Philippines. It's a significant weakness for the Navy. China, the warships of the Chinese Navy. You can't patrol this area for a long time. Instead, it's based on deployment. The Coast Guard ships, it can only be. It's a tornado. In recent years, China has intensified coercion of the Philippines. One of those measures is stopping ships. Hey. United States has repeatedly stressed its commitment to the U.S. military treaty. Philippines, and with allies like Japan and Australia, has conducted joint patrols with the Navy. The Philippines forced the South. China's Navy must deploy more ships. The war before the war. Confrontation is taking place. Well, look on a geographic map. We see the Philippines. Control of strategic points such as the straits through an important route, connecting the South China Sea to the Pacific. Okay. We recently learned that the Philippines, they're armed with a BrahMos missile. A supersonic missile. And it's very possible that they could use it to fight China. The BrahMos missile, and US-backed systems such as MSIS or Tifong. It could threaten Chinese ships in the region. The Philippines can work with the US and its allies, like Japan and Australia, to create a no-access zone. And in this disputed area of the sea, that the Chinese warships engaged in the pursuit and crashed the VA into those Philippine ships. It's totally possible. Risk of military conflict. And then under the Mutual Defense Treaty, then America, you will be responsible for protecting your allies. 11/7 The news agency. The AP reported that Admiral Stephen Collar, commander of the world's largest naval fleet, is the U.S. Pacific Fleet, stated at the Manila Forum that they're committed to protecting freedom, maritime affairs and the rule of law in the Indo-Pacific. He said it was the fleet's mission. Pacific Ocean. It's working with allies and partner countries to stop all acts of aggression and provocations in the region, and if necessary, will achieve success in combat. This can be considered one of the most powerful statements of the United States Pacific Fleet. Looking back, we see only China. There are new aggression and provocation in the region. In the region of all American allies, and America says so, it could be targeting two countries. There is North Korea outside of China, but we know the North Korean Navy is not worth talking about. The Chinese Navy is the one that threatened the order of the world. That's what Mr. Collar said. It's a warning and a warning signal. Cold weather to Beijing. Remember, he also claimed that, if necessary, we will also achieve success. To fight means to assert. If the last card comes out, if that's a fight, we not tired of Beijing, I can also make it. Beijing must embrace hate and we will win. If you look at China over the years, they're also prepared for these situations. Stress and it's probably preparing for an American war. So over the years, they've been actively building military islands on many islands and reefs of Hong Sa Island, as well as Sa in the South China Sea. However, the positions. This point it doesn't just require cost, construction giant, it also requires daily maintenance. It's very expensive. And it doesn't qualify as a base. The war is really. These islands are largely uninhabited, not suitable for work. Living even though it is a commodity. Essential can be supplied continuously. But the Chinese Navy, you're having trouble doing that. Protection. These islands as well as supply routes. Remember those islands are as special as the Chinese base. School Islands Sa is a long way away. The mainland of China, thousands of kilometers from Hainan Island and from the area, thousands of kilometers in southern China. The Sa is close, but Sa is a long way away. So it's China. If they want to maintain their military bases, that's my solution. They're forced to spend a huge amount of resources. That's not to mention a problem, it's that nature is destroying things. That artificial island. Imagine building a house on this land. As the years go by, it's also degraded. And the degradation in the sea is very strong. This sun, this rain, this storm. And then there's the erosion of this ocean wave. It's terrible. Remember, it's the corrosion that's worse at sea. There is a lot in this land. So the military bases, China's on the sea. If you can't use it, it's degraded and damaged. I remember once I shared you. They are the bases of China, how it's dealing with the South China Sea. The geological activities, and then there's the natural corrosive activity of nature too. It is also an enemy of you. China's military bases, Beijing, they call them aircraft carriers, can't sink his, in the middle of the South China Sea to deal with the United States and its allies. But I see. It's these aircraft carriers that are rusting. It has no power to act. It's as big as they imagine. In addition, the US military, there's also a strategy very dangerous that they used in World War II. That's the island hopping attack tactic. They attack this island, ignore the next island and attack the island adjoining. They're kind of skipping. They succeeded in that war too to fight Japan. You should remember that back then, the Japanese Empire, it's their military forces are very powerful, but in the end I gave up. The United States with its strategy, the island is very that notorious. Now, after so many years, after 85, the United States is still improving it day by day. And they are always forge a dance strategy. That's to deal with China, in the seas, in the Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, the sea that, the lands. It requires a navy. Strong can be managed. Now, it's about China's supply to the world. Its military island. It's a round trip of a destroyer. China. It consumes a significant amount of fuel. And after a few weeks, he had to go back to the base. Or forced back to the supply points too. Well, maybe it can keep working. Or is there a supply ship to follow? The deployment of the fleet, the winter carrier, it's even more complicated. It also asks a lot of questions. Logistics and more protection. From the outside, the Chinese Navy has a significant advantage compared to countries like the Philippines, Malay Indo or Vietnamese in the region. But the distance and the supply line, it's a big weakness. Fighter jet, missile systems used by the US and its allies, base in the Philippines, closer to the battlefield. And if war breaks out, the Chinese Navy will be immediately hurt. The United States took advantage. It's a very important part of the war. Ladies and gentlemen at war, in the battle to capture the battlefield, to take advantage of, it has been half successful. Most of the Air Force and Navy, the President of China, of the Chinese Navy, it's been delivered to the Chinese Air Force. That means their Navy doesn't have many planes. Air support in the South China Sea, it's getting more complicated. Without the support of the Air Force, the Chinese Navy's warships, it will immediately become the target of the air raid. And this is probably a fact that their fleet received clear. I can't say Beijing, they don't recognize their weaknesses, they know it, but because they have been doing it. That we're the world's second largest military power, so they didn't dare to admit that fact. Dare to admit it is one thing, whether you can change it or not is another matter. With a closed mechanism like we said, the Chinese military is hard to change. It's a mechanism that commands from top to bottom, it has no flexibility. And it doesn't have one. Well, it's interacting from the bottom up. The people below only listen to orders. Above tell which order is below follow. Even jumping into the fire. It doesn't have any flexibility. As the structural organization of the United States military it's a little more democratic, and it's an interaction. Then there's the officers below. They also make decisions that are more independent compared to the commanders. Especially the A. That's what the class is called. They have a very good strategic support mission. China doesn't have that. Senior general ordered. General under authority to follow. Soldiers just jump into the fire. Maybe in a few years it will be China. They'll see their main front line as the Straits, Taiwan, and, if war breaks out here, the Eastern District will need support. But the Hainan fleet. Maybe it's difficult to take care of yourself, let's not say support. More recently, China's North Sea Fleet. They also sent destroyers and submarines. The kingdom to exercise with Russia. Then to the Pacific to patrol general. Actually expanded the front line. The North Sea Fleet, they're constantly harassing Japan and they're targeting Japan. If war breaks out, it's overloaded. To support the East Sea Fleet. Protect the East China Sea and the Yellow Sea. Base of the North Sea and East China Sea fleets. It's not close. The South China Sea Fleet's base is further away. It makes it difficult to support each other. What we see is the coastline in China is very long, and their country is huge. And their fleets aren't very flexible, does not move flexibly. So it's very difficult to support each other. Every fleet has an aggressive expansion posture, not commensurate with their actual capabilities. So when you have a problem it's very difficult to support each other. We analyze it's so long to know that it was the VA's recent midship collision. The Chinese Navy and Coast Guard. It exposed the true nature of the Navy. It also highlights their dilemma of Beijing on strategy on BA fronts. The political extravagance, military ineptitude and rampant corruption. Lands are the ones from the acupressure China that the military is trying to fix it. We don't even know when it will be fixed. Not to mention recently, the purges in the Chinese military weakened the doctor, a lot of gas. When the army is no longer in the mood, don't tell them what they're fighting for. And then China's one-child army. It's also their weakness. No one dared to die on the battlefield. So many factors. It's what gives China its real military power. Some people say paper tigers. It's not scary what they say. But then there's the military power of a country. It's not just in these comments. We can't really say for sure. Somewhere in China, they're hiding something, and know where it is, until the real battle. I don't know which cat bit which one. Let's take A. Remember the comments. These analyses are for reference only. If the war, when it explodes, it depends on a lot of factors. One factor in that is that the Allies are supporting. And Beijing is trying to collect 10 of his allies in the world. Like-minded allies against the United States. For example, Russia. If China and Russia synergy, we don't know what's going to happen together. So these are just master analyses, our agency, and you can see it as a reference. Comparison. Today's show is also for today's show. Permission to pause. And hello. See you in the next videos.